Hi, welcome to the in-home services training, the cost report training presented by the Department of Human Services. This will go over how to fill out the recently updated cost report, and we'll also give direction on submission requirements and contact information for any questions, should you have some. The overview of the training, we'll go over how to fill out the cover letter, Schedule A, expenses, Schedule B, revenue, Schedule C, salary, Schedule D, miscellaneous expenses, and Schedule E, non-billable hours. For those of you that have completed a cost report in the past, Schedule E is new to the cost report template, so please be aware of that, and there will be some changes for some of the other schedules. The cover letter, pretty self-explanatory. Your agency name, agency address. The period of the report is traditionally the 12-month period covering your fiscal year. It's your fiscal year. Don't use the state's fiscal year. Don't use any other year. Use your provider fiscal year. And then the type of organization that you are, either freestanding or hospital-based. Continuing on with the cover letter, for total units of service, we need those to be reported as units and not as hours. Please report them as units. There's the service codes for homemaker and nursing. Just use those as you would bill to the department. For all other category, if there's a service code, or you would consider Medicare or private pay in this category, but please include all other units that are not included with the service codes that we've identified on the cover letter. And then finally, contact information, name, phone number, email address of the individual that we should contact regarding the cost report. So if you have somebody specific that you would prefer we contact, please list them in this information. And then here would be an example of what the cover letter will look like. Might be difficult to see, but again, was just a couple minor changes in this. Otherwise, it'll be similar to what you have seen in the past. We'll move on. Schedule A, this is the expenses, where you'll report all of your facility expenses. I'll remind this quite often throughout the presentation, but if there's a cell that has a formula in it, or if a cell cannot be, if nothing can be entered into a cell without unlocking it, there is a reason for that. We would prefer that you would leave those alone. We use those as part of our analysis, and if you were to change what's in that cell, it can lead to inaccurate analysis. As you see, this is the heading for Schedule A. Account number, trial balance, that is your expenses per trial balance. And then you have program related adjustments, and then non-program related adjustments. And then the next column over is the net of the trial balance amounts minus or addition of program and non-program related adjustments. And then your admin and support, and then how you would allocate them to either homemaker and nursing, and then the admin and support is also an allocation. And then your total adjusted costs should be the total of admin and support, homemaker and nursing columns. One thing I forgot to add at the beginning is that the numbers that you see, the amounts that you see in the slides are all made up for the purposes of this training. So don't take those as actual amounts for a provider. Those are strictly amounts that we made up. They may be totally out of place or out of line, but just keep in mind they're just to see how the numbers flow across and down. Personnel salaries. As you can see, this includes salaries and wages for full and part-time staff, for your administrative, your homemaker, supervisor, coordinator, your direct care staff, and your clerical staff. Bookkeepers, if you pay a full-time, if you have an individual on your staff that you pay directly, not a fee for service, they would be included here. If you have an accountant that you use on a fee for service, there's another section in the cost report for those. The salaries need to be allocated each category based on an allowable allocation method. Actual time spent in each area is one example, and a very accurate method of allocating expenses for this particular, for the salaries. We'll move on. Benefits and taxes. These are expenses paid and accrued by the agency under its own or other employee benefit plans. This area do not include the employee contributions or payments to these areas. Keep in mind, these are just strictly expenses incurred by the agency, incurred and paid. Health benefits plans, retirement plans, vacation, personal paid leave. This continues on. Other benefits, and if you have something under other in an other category, it will be moved, that amount, that total will be moved to Schedule D, miscellaneous expenses, and you will be required to then fill out that schedule. FICA taxes, unemployment insurance, and workers' compensation insurance should all be reported in this area. Next section is for professional fees and contract services. This is where you would include those fee for services for bookkeeping or accounting, auditing, legal services, and if you hire an outside agency for cleaning, maintenance, those types of services, this is where those expenses would go. Do not, if these are staff members, if these are folks that are employees of the agency, do not include them here. There are other sections that we've identified for these areas. These are all for fees for service. We'll continue on. Schedule A, expenses continued to supplies. Again, these are expenses incurred by the agency for supplies used within the operations. Office supplies, medical supplies, and then the last section is other supplies, minor equipment purchases. Again, these are, if they don't fit into office or medical, they would go into the other supplies category. And again, this amount will be taken over to Schedule D, and additional support will be needed to identify these items. And we will explain further on Schedule D as we move on throughout the training. Occupancy, these are building related expenses. Expenses should be allocated based on our recommendation is by square footage of each program. You'll include rent of space, utilities, telephone, property insurance, and taxes in this section. And then also the other occupancy expense. These of course are any expenses related that cannot be reported in any of the other accounts. And again, that amount will go over to Schedule D, and additional support will be needed for those expenses. As we move on, the next section is other agency costs. This would include advertising, employee recruiting, and again, for advertising, employee recruitment is an allowable expense, but promotion of the entity is not an allowable expense. You would still report all of the advertising costs in your trial balance column, and then you would make an adjustment to remove the not allowable cost of advertising. You also have dues, membership, subscription, training videos. That's a large account, but it's all one, so any expenses related to those areas would be included in that section. Bad debt, private pay, any bad debt incurred would need to be reported and then removed as a non-allowable expense. Bad debt for your waiver co-pays, again, same thing, it needs to be reported and then removed as a non-allowable expense. Continuing on with other agency costs, we have professional liability insurance, and then also miscellaneous or other expenses that cannot be identified specifically to those areas would go into the 3290 miscellaneous account, and that amount will again be taken over to Schedule D where additional detail will be given. Continue on. The next section is for travel and transportation. You would include expenses for rental, vehicle rental or mileage, and then other travel and transportation. And again, the other travel transportation amount will be taken over to Schedule D. For the mileage, again, it states it there, but please attach documentation of mileage reimbursement rates your agency has used to justify the expense. That is a requirement, so please keep that in mind when you are filling out that portion of the cost report. We'll continue on to depreciation. This is for fixed assets, anything over $5,000 and a useful life of greater than 1 year, you must depreciate. You can depreciate assets under that amount, but it has to have a useful life of greater than 1 year. You need to use the straight line method of depreciation, and you must follow the American Hospital Association guidelines, the most recent guidelines. Keep that in mind, especially with your accounting staff, that they need to follow these. These are requirements. You'll have vehicle depreciation, equipment depreciation, and building depreciation. And please note that buildings are 3% for masonry and 4% for frame-based structures. If you are renting the property, you are not allowed to take depreciation. There's no expense to depreciation for you that we recognize if you are renting or leasing the property. Schedule A, as you go across and go down, it will be totaling. We do have formulas, so again, please do not mess with the formulas or any section that needs to be unlocked. There's a reason why we lock these or we put formulas in. It's to help with our analysis. Again, you'll have total prior to administration allocation. You'll have your total admin and support, and then you will there's a line there for allocated admin and support. You'll take that total admin and support amount, in this case it's $66,200, and then you allocate it to either homemaker or nursing, depending on an allowable allocation method. Our recommendation is to use your total homemaker and nursing to overall total to those totals prior to the admin allocation, and determine what percentage of each, and then that would be determine your admin and support. And so in this instance, we took the $66,200 and allocated $53,000 to homemaker, $13,200 to nursing, and then you'll have the bottom line will be your total expenditures. and then you'll see a rate per unit hour. Again, that's a formula for us to use, but it also helps you identify as a provider what your rate per unit hour is. Schedule B revenue. This will assist with identifying the revenues that we're requiring you to specifically break out. Again, if a cell is locked, it's because it has a formula in it, or it's because we need it to be protected to help keep the integrity of the analysis. So please refrain from changing any locked or formula-based cells. And you'll see the heading for Schedule B. Pretty basic: account number and title. We'll identify a DHS service code if it applies, and then your totals. For the first half of Schedule B, we have 2010 Homemaker. The service codes are identified for in-home services, Medicaid, the state plan or HOPE waiver, and caregiver services. You may have private pay, Medicare, and other. Keep in mind that if you were to provide respite services, or if there's a service code that you bill to the department that is not identified within this cost report, that it would go into the other category, and we would recommend you submit an attachment to the cost report to identify what is included in the other categories. It helps us identify areas that, especially areas that we pay for services that we're not recognizing specifically within the cost report, and it helps determine what your cost per unit is for those areas, or in this case, your revenue per unit. And then the other half is nursing. So you have your homemaker and then your nursing. Again, follow your service codes as you bill to the department. Same rule applies for the other category. If there's a service that you bill to the department or that is not listed, please include it in other and attach a document identifying what is included in other. This will help. This again will give us a better analysis of how your organization is doing in relation to the services. We'll move on. This slide identifies the total revenue. And again, it's a automatically populated cell. Please don't try and enter the number. It will add up as it should. Schedule C, the salaries. Again, please leave any locked cells alone. Any cells with formulas in it, please leave them alone. Here's the heading for Schedule C. You'll see one part list position, job title, total paid hour, or total hours paid, total wages paid, benefits. And then you also see column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, or column 5, 6, 7, and 8. Those are synonymous with each other, and within the cost report template we'll explain. There is a section at the bottom of the template. It shows what's needed for each column. We'll move into greater detail. Again, for position and job title, please do not enter the employee's name. We strictly want job titles or positions, whatever you might call them. We have a section for direct care salaries and a section for non-direct care salaries. And you would list registered nurses as a group. So if you have multiple RNs or multiple nursing assistants, you'll list them as a group or whatever you might call them. And then you'll list the total wages paid, the benefit cost to the entity, and then your average base. And we'll move on to the next slide before there's further explanation on that. The average base, if you look at the bottom of this slide, is for entering the beginning wage paid to an individual in that position or job duty, not necessarily the lowest paid or the average of the wages of that job duty. It would be what the starting wage would be for that area. And then the average midpoint is somebody with about 1 to 4 years of experience, or where you see an individual within your organization being at kind of a midpoint of that pay grade or that job title. That would be the amount you would put there. And then the average high is the maximum amount that you would be willing to pay to an individual in that position or job duty. This helps us identify where exactly our wages are at, or where our rate is at, and if it's in relation to where you as an organization are paying. Schedule D is miscellaneous expenses. This is where all those items from Schedule A and the other or miscellaneous categories will come to. There's a line in each section. Bottom line will be total reported on Schedule A, and then just above that will be a total of the expenses you've broken out. So as you can see in this example, employee recognition, there was another miscellaneous expense reported on for account 3290 of Schedule A for $550, and so far the amount that this has been identified has only been $300, so it is red. Once those two amounts equal, the red fill will go away in the cells. Another thing to keep in mind is do not use decimal points. Round off to the nearest whole dollar, 0.49, go down, 0.50 and up, go up. So please keep that in mind as well. Okay. Schedule E, non-billable hours. This is a new schedule that we've added this year. Similar, these are hours that we use to identify that you're incurring expenses for, but we do not allow direct billing for. So those services are being provided to folks served. Again, if a cell cannot be changed, if it's locked, please leave it alone. If it's got a formula in it, please leave it alone. Here's the heading for Schedule E. Again, position, job title, training hours, paid vacation, paid holiday, documentation time, and travel time. And then it's broke out between nursing staff and homemaker staff. Would not include, these are for the direct service professionals. We don't want to include clerical staff. These are folks that are going out and providing the service to the individuals. So just include your direct care staff. And then break it out between nursing staff and homemaker staff. And as you can see, the amounts here may or may not make sense. We just simply are using it for training purposes for today. Again, don't enter the employee's name, just a job title or position name. And then as you can, as we said earlier, training hours, paid vacation, paid holiday, documentation time, travel time, hours that are being incurred by an employee but are not being billed to the department for because of services being provided. And then we'll move to the very last slide, and I know it says questions. Obviously, you won't be able to ask questions from this training, but if you have any questions, you can send an email to myself, Darren Reese, at darren.reese@state.sd.us, or Amanda Van Balen at amanda.vanbalen@state.sd.us. You can also send any questions to dhsfinance@state.sd.us. I would recommend, if you have a question, to probably send it to Amanda or myself. We don't check that DHS Finance email account every day, and so it's if you're looking for a faster turnaround, you can email us at our personal email addresses or the phone numbers listed. Cost reports need to be submitted to dhsfinance@state.sd.us. We need the Excel file. Do not PDF it. Do not put it in any other format. We need it in the Excel file. In the email, on the subject line, include the facility name and the fiscal year end you're reporting in that subject line. It helps sort out what facility. It's easier to search when we're looking for a specific cost report, so please include your name and your fiscal year end in the subject line. And the cost reports are due 150 days following your fiscal year end, not the state's fiscal year end, not calendar year, not anything. It's after your fiscal year end, 150 days, approximately, we usually say about 5 months. So 5 months following your fiscal year end. So if your year end is December 31st, your cost report will be due May 31st of the following year. And then also we have the link for the cost report template and instructions, and this training will be included with those as well. So please use the training, use the instructions, contact Amanda or myself. We're more than willing to help, and we appreciate your effort in submitting the cost report, and we're hopefully able to use that information to better our funding to you as service providers.